Hello and welcome to Bread and Thread, a podcast about food and domestic history. I'm Liz.
And I'm Hazel. We are two friends who studied archaeology together and love talking about history and old stuff and making things, either historical things or not. And we like to start by talking about what we're currently making. So, what are you up to?
I don't think I've started or finished any projects since we last recorded.
Oh,
Well, the thing is, I had a birthday, so I've mostly just been having birthday fun.
you mean birthday fun doesn't include obsessively making things?
I've been working on existing projects, but I did buy some new hair ribbons because I am a Victorian lady apparently who requires new hair ribbons to celebrate my date of birth.
Who isn't a Victorian lady in these times of pandemic?
That's true. I relate very strongly to Victorian ladies right now.
Just like enjoying fripperies and sighing by the window.
I mean, I did spend a whole £4.50 on earrings, so you
Oh,
know.
I would consider that a frippery in a good way.
But it's not my fault Claire's had all of their Halloween stuff on offer.
That is not your fault, I agree.
So what have you been up to? Presumably more than me.
I wouldn't say that. Like, heck, yeah, working on some stuff. I mentioned I was making stuff for this community garden craft fair, I think, a couple episodes ago. But I can elaborate on that. It's so this community garden my parents are involved with. They have a stall at our village's Christmas market. Well, not just the Christmas market. There's an old so my village well, the next village over from me, but still kind of my village, I think, has a cattle market that is now a car park, but the original cattle market and everything is still there, which is kind of cool. And then next to that is the world's tiniest town square.
Okay.
Because the village used to be a lot more important and, was considered like a decent sized town by kind of medieval standards. And it's now, because of like rivers silting up and stuff, it's now no longer an important port, no longer important. Haha. Um,
Oh.
I know. And and it's now like a tiny village, but it still has this little town square that is owned by the town trust. And it has a license for a market that it's had for like hundreds of years
Yeah,
because they used to have one. So like they brought back this market fairly recently,
that's
which is
fun.
cool. Yeah, so yeah, tiny village market, it's fun, but the community garden has a stall there, and so I'm making some stuff for the like Christmas stall to raise some money for the garden. And it's just like little amigurumi insects and things. Um
Nice.
yeah,
We love a bug.
they are very good. Actually, I will put the link to the patterns that I'm using on the Twitter, because they're really great. And the uh the designer allows them to be sold for non-profit, which is really nice of them.
Nice.
Yeah, but actually, I feel like because I showed it to my mum the other day, and she was like, "Oh, I don't think we should sell that. I think we should keep them to use as like educational displays." So I was like, okay, maybe." But yeah, I'm making a little butterfly, and there's like a whole life cycle set of patterns. So it's like um, a caterpillar, and there's like an egg that you can put it into, and then you take out the caterpillar, and there's like a cocoon that goes with it, and then you like put wings on the caterpillar, and it becomes a butterfly, and it's amazing.
Very cool.
Yeah, the designer, I think the website is Layli Lala or something. I will, yeah, link to it because they are great. And it's coming out very well. So I have a cocoon and a caterpillar so far, and that is it.
So this is a bio slash book episode, and I mentioned Victorian ladies.
Mhm.
Would you like to hear about a Victorian lady?
I sure would. Which one? There were quite a lot.
Have you heard of Mrs. Beeton?
Now, I have indeed come across Mrs. Beeton, yes. But the thing is, as I was saying earlier when we were just sort of chatting before this episode, I have heard of Mrs. Beeton because she's like a big deal in Victorian cooking. Um, but I don't actually know very much about Mrs. Beeton other than wrote a cookbook, which is a big deal in Victorian cooking. So yeah, I'm excited to find out more.
So Mrs. Beeton is very definitely Victorian. She was born in 1836, so she would have been about a year old when the Victorian era started.
Okay. That
Um,
is super Victorian.
yeah, firmly Victorian, I think. In a part of London that I never know how to pronounce, but I'm gonna go with Marylebone. I've heard
Marylebone?
it pronounced like 5 different ways.
Okay.
To a linen merchant and his wife. Um, she had 2 younger sisters, and then her father died, and her mum remarried and got 4 stepchildren, and then had lots of children with the new husband. So Isabella Mason, as she was, ended up the oldest of 20 children.
Oh, wow. Okay. Also, Isabella, I was about to ask what her first name was because I assume it wasn't Mrs. That is a lot of siblings to have.
Yeah, I can't find information on how many survived because obviously Victorian families.
Mhm.
But she referred to her siblings as a living cargo of children, so we have to assume probably most of them.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot. I mean, if by Victorian standards you're like, oh, that's a lot of kids, it's probably a lot.
Yeah. Apparently, the one of the younger ones, Alfred, thought that the number of children that his father and mother had was ridiculous. So he sent his father a condom as a practical joke.
Oh, wow.
And in response, his father sent him into the merchant navy because at that point, as well, just generally, it's a bit much. But apparently, at that point, they were mostly used by sex workers,
Mhm.
so it was an unwelcome implication and impropriety.
I can see how that could be taken the wrong way in presumably the 1840s or 50s.
I mean, also now, frankly,
I
don't
yeah,
send
I
your
would
dad
also say
contraceptives.
it's probably not usual to send your parents a condom.
So yeah, she went to boarding school in Islington and in Heidelberg.
Oh wow.
Heidelberg is where she learned a lot of baking skills, especially. And when she came back, she took pastry lessons from a baker in Epsom.
I'm surprised they could afford to send her abroad to study with that many children.
I guess they were just doing very well.
Hmm?
But yeah, her stepfather was the one of the first clerks of Epsom Racecourse, so presumably he had a lot of money from
Ah,
that.
fingers in many pies, as it were, but probably
Mm.
not as many as his daughter.
But yeah, so eventually she marries Samuel Beeton, who was the
Okay.
founder of Boys Own magazine. That's Boys Own, not Boys Own.
I was thinking that, and I'm glad you said it. I mean, it makes sense that it would not be Boyzone with a Z. Although I would like to see Victorian Boyzone.
But that was a very popular magazine for boys,
Hmm.
which was basically a newspaper for children almost.
I think I have heard. Is that where, stuff like the Boy's Own Book of Adventures comes from?
Yeah, they all spin off from that.
Okay.
Um, he was also the first British publisher of Uncle Tom's Cabin, so he was obviously very well off himself.
Okay.
But he actually also started publishing Mrs. Beeton's writings, um, including recipes, but also sort of general domestic writings in the English Woman's Domestic Magazine.
Ah, it does help when your husband is a publisher.
Definitely. Yeah, so that was a magazine for middle class women.
Hmm.
She started out translating French fiction to serialize and then started working on a cookery column.
Oh, interesting. So she started out in fiction, not cookery.
She did, and some would argue she stayed in fiction.
Ah,
Um, so there was a controversy about her books and recipes because so she got a letter from one of her sisters, Henrietta, saying, "Cookery is a science that is only learnt by long experience and years of study, which of course you have not had," and
oh,
advising her to maybe borrow from other things, compile recipes from other books.
hmm.
Um, so she ended up straight up copying recipes, including from quite famous chefs and cookery writers, including Eliza Acton, Hannah Glass, Antoine Carême.
Okay, so she took that very literally.
Yeah, it's thought by some of her biographers that she just full on copied most of her recipes.
Wow, see me after class, Isabella Beeton.
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
There's a little bit of a debate because a lot of her recipes are at that basic level of you could argue that it's sort of uncopyrightable, some of the stuff, but some of it is just very blatantly copied from especially
Mm,
French cookery writers.
okay. Hmm. My opinion of Mrs. Beeton is less favorable now.
Some of the editing is also just bad. Like on the same page, she talks about how tomatoes are wholesome and stimulate the appetite, and also how they, quote, emit a vapor so powerful as to cause vertigo and vomiting. Which
Huh?
is it, Isabella?
Okay. I mean, I can't ever say that I've ever thrown up at the smell of tomatoes.
Yeah, so the editing isn't great. The recipes are largely not her own. Um, and some of them do use ingredients that she also talks about not liking. Like,
Okay.
potatoes are apparently suspicious. And mangoes
Well,
taste like turpentine.
I is she eating it green or something? Because
I
even that can
don't
be
know.
delicious. Like, what?
Like, it's very much a thing of upper class British people going, "Ah, all these places that we're profiting from colonizing, their food is awful and evil, and I won't touch it."
Except to pretend that I invented it.
It's wild to me.
I don't know though. Potatoes, man. Sometimes I feel like they are giving me an eye.
Terrible. Yeah, there's also just some questionable advice, like, not Victorian questionable, just regular questionable. Like, she talks about cooking vermicelli for half an hour, boiling
Hmm.
it. Like, whatever else you do with it at that point, I don't think that's pasta anymore.
Everyone likes mush, right?
But this is
It's
especially for putting in soup. So you're just
oh,
so the word pasta comes from the word for paste,
uh-huh.
and I think she's maybe taking that a little bit too far by making a pasta soup that's just some nice broth with some mush in the bottom.
I can imagine that. I can imagine the texture, and I do not like it.
Yeah.
No.
Interesting thing about pasta though, she does also have some sweet macaroni dishes,
Okay.
including like a macaroni baked in a custard, which honestly sounds kind of nice. It's like a lemon custard with a little bit of nutmeg.
Yeah, I feel like that could be good.
Except once again, she cooks the macaroni for 50 minutes.
Oh, no! Okay, so you're basically breaking it down into just, like, starch.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, that just sounds like a stiff custard.
Would you like me to read out the recipe for this?
By all means.
Put the milk into a saucepan with the lemon peel and sugar. Bring it to boiling point. So you're already boiling milk, which is not going to taste good.
Okay.
Bring it to the boiling point. Drop in the macaroni and let it gradually swell over a gentle fire, but do not allow the pipes to break. Again, she says it takes 40 to 50 minutes for this.
Hey,
Like, even cooking it from dried, which I have to assume is what she's doing when when she's talking about letting it swell. That's
uh,
that is not going to be tender. Should be firm and not soft.
hmm,
You're boiling this pasta for 50 minutes.
good luck, I guess. Wow, that is unappealing.
Mmm. But most of her recipes are pretty good, which is probably why this book has never been out of print.
Okay.
For reference, this year is the 160th, sorry, anniversary of
Oh,
Mrs. Beeton's
wow.
book of household management.
I didn't realize it was continuously in print. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
amazing. I wonder how many people, like, actually use the recipes regularly.
I am unclear on that part because, at a certain point, it's going to be more for historical interest.
Yeah.
Yeah, but also because it was largely marketed at middle class women, like there's stuff about how to hire servants and the rights and responsibilities of landlords.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't think it's for Hook's TM, if you know what I mean.
Okay.
I feel like it's one of those cookbooks that we've talked about before that's more so can keep an eye on what your cook is doing rather than
Ah, I
cook for your house
see.
yourself.
Okay. Yeah. And you can maybe go into the kitchen every now and then and make some of the dish.
Yeah, you can make the macaroni custard yourself one day when it's cook's day off.
Yeah, that does give a vibe.
Mm. Interestingly, so the first edition after her death contained an obituary notice,
Mhm.
but most editions didn't mention the fact that she died only 4 years after it was published.
Oh,
And there's a lot of speculation that this was basically so that it would continue to sell and people could imagine her out there cooking all of the recipes herself.
I see. Okay, so people would, theoretically think that Mrs. Beeton was, like, a continuing presence. Um, wow, that's almost like trying to create a celebrity when they're not there.
Mm. I mean, especially considering that she was only not quite 29 when she died.
Oh, no way. I also did not know that. Wow.
1836 to 1865,
Wow.
which kind of hits you like a slap in the face when you realize that.
I mean, yeah, that's not far off our ages.
And
Okay.
like publishing it basically saved Samuel Beaton's business apparently. He made some very bad investments the same year that it was published.
I I guess it doesn't really surprise me though that they would, sort of try and carry on the brand even though she died, because that does seem to be a thing with, like, popular things in that era. I remember in the, Thérèse de Dilmont episode,
Mm,
they had her niece, I think it was, take over her name essentially so they could continue selling the books.
yeah, and I mean, especially when it's her husband is basically entirely in charge of the Mrs. Beaton brand.
Yeah,
From
that
being her publisher
sounds
and being
I
her
mean
husband, it does seem like he was kind of exploiting it a bit.
mhm. Was everything that she wrote published through him?
From what I can find, I haven't been able to find anything that wasn't.
Mhm.
Like, her and she basically owed her entire career to him.
Okay. I wonder, like, if there was a contract or anything, or if it was literally just him doing it.
That's the thing, because he was her husband and it was the 1860s, so I think it would be expected that he would just run all of the business end of it, even if it was
Yeah.
a different publisher. Um, but yeah, there is some interesting stuff outside of the cooking part, including there's a lot of talk about she writes a lot about how the human body works.
Oh,
Some accurate stuff, some less accurate stuff.
okay. Like, in what context is it?
Mostly talking about infant health. There's a lot. There's a whole chapter on sort of raising children and the nursery and childhood diseases,
Mhm.
including a bit where she talks about being very thankful that the state makes people vaccinate their children against smallpox,
Oh,
which I just find interesting.
yeah, definitely.
But yeah, she talks about the digested food going straight into the arteries.
Mhm.
Like there's kind of a rudimentary understanding of digestion, but not really an accurate one.
Okay.
And there's instructions for infant CPR, including in the case of stillbirth.
Oh, wow.
Some of it is, stuff that you see on things like Call the Midwife, where like they'll rub the baby's back really vigorously.
Mhm.
Um, but apparently, if that doesn't work, you can try plunging the child up to the neck in 80-degree um, Fahrenheit, presumably water.
Um, wow. I mean, that'll do something, I guess.
Like, I guess sometimes a shock will do it.
Maybe. Oh,
Like, it's not an unpleasant temperature. It's about 27 degrees.
okay.
But I'm not really sure what it would do to help.
Yeah, like if they're choking, I don't know what. I
Well,
did
this is
my
specifically apparently if they've been born not breathing because their impure blood is going to their lungs rather than going through the heart like it's supposed to.
oh, I see. So it's like birth advice. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
it's some interesting stuff, but I mean, there is also a pharmacy section where most of the treatments are some sort of narcotic mixed with sugar,
Yay.
which will do something.
I actually did my infant CPR training quite recently and it was it was quite interesting. Like the holding them upside down and bashing them on the back thing is still a thing. Um, but also they demonstrate it and then they give you the baby dummy and you're suddenly like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to hurt the baby."
Interestingly, a lot of her breastfeeding advice matches current advice.
Oh,
Um, she talks about breastfeeding for a few months and then gradually introducing solid food and saying you can breastfeed for longer.
mhm,
Um, but that you don't there's not really much benefit to it after about 15 months, which about matches the current advice, tend to say 12 months now.
okay.
And she says that it is uncalled for to breastfeed after 15 months, and that you must feed them other things as well,
Oh,
which I guess people who don't have, like, food security might well try and breastfeed exclusively for longer to save on food,
yeah, I can see
but
that.
I don't think they're the people who are gonna be buying Mrs. Beeton's book.
Yeah, they're probably not the people who are gonna be making the vermicelli custard.
She also warns against co-sleeping, which is actually illegal now because it is dangerous.
Mm, yeah. Oh, well, at least that's some good advice.
Yeah, like, there is some genuinely good advice in there, but it seems to be largely stuff that would be received wisdom, like, this is probably stuff that she learned from her mother,
Yeah.
and while helping to raise 20 children because she was the oldest sister and that's what happens.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I can see how the child-related advice would probably be fairly good.
But yeah, she talks about how, she had the benefit of helping to raise younger siblings, and a lot of people don't, so she's passing
Okay.
on all of that wisdom, which I think is quite cool. Like I say, a lot of it is received wisdom, but I guess the thing with received wisdom is not everyone receives it.
Mhm. And sometimes it's quite useful to receive it from somebody.
So she talks a little bit about various weaning foods, including baked flour mixed with um, various things like arrowroot as a kind of low nutritional value but gets them used to food kind of thing.
Mhm.
Interestingly, there's also a whole section on convulsions or infantine fits,
Oh,
and also describes rickets as a frequent result of dental irritation while talking about teething.
right. Huh.
Yeah,
Not
like
sure how you make that connection.
yeah, and one of the first aid advices she gives for convulsions is again submerge the child in a hot bath up to the chin, which I'm not sure how helpful that's going to be.
No.
And there's a whole section because, like I say, she talks about how important it is to vaccinate against smallpox. She also talks about chicken pox
Okay.
and how even though it is mild, it is still bad, and you shouldn't deliberately infect your children. And it just makes me think about pox parties.
Hint, hint, people of today, yeah.
Like apparently that's been a thing for a while.
Okay.
But she also
I
reassures parents that they shouldn't worry about disfigurement from chickenpox like you get from smallpox.
hmm. Wow, I mean, yeah, I don't remember, like, actual chickenpox parties being a thing, but I certainly remember it just being no big deal. You expect your kid to get it, you don't try and stop them. Um,
Well, I've mostly heard of pox parties as like an affluent anti-vax American thing, although I'm sure they do happen here as well.
uh-huh. Okay.
And yes, she also, as I said, she has a whole section of sort of pharmaceutical things, including a very long list of the principal poisons with their antidotes or remedies,
Here's a list of all of the poisons, everyone.
including, multiple kinds of arsenic.
Okay, good to know, I guess.
Apparently, for food poisoning, it's emetics and castor oil.
Actually, I suppose if these are things that you might have in your household reasonably, it's good to know, like,
Oh yeah,
how
definitely. Like one of the arsenic things is listed as fly powder,
mm,
and there's also some poisonous plants that you might encounter just in a garden, like foxgloves.
okay. Yeah, like, if you're having these around, it's probably good to know how much of them is poisonous.
Oh, it doesn't say how much of them is poisonous
Oh, okay.
or how much of the antidote or remedy to give them.
Oh, okay. Just these things that are poisonous.
Yeah, it's just like if your child has eaten smelling salts, give them lemon juice and vinegar. Apparently, that'll help.
Okay.
But she does also go in depth about the symptoms of poisoning from these different things, which I imagine is genuinely useful.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
Which I just find it interesting because I know it's called the Book of Household Management, but it does generally get talked about as a cookbook.
Mhm.
But it's got all this stuff, like I say, about, poisons, being a landlord or being a tenant, hiring staff.
Yeah, it's almost like the upper class Victorian version of bull cook.
Yes. Interestingly as well, every recipe has a cost on it.
Oh, what,
Like,
sorry?
every recipe has a price.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, yeah. Huh.
like, the average cost per portion,
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
which is quite cool.
Yeah.
She
Yeah, that's
talks
really
about thrift a lot, actually. She also talks about the correct amount to pay various domestic servants.
ah, that's really interesting to have as, like, a historical evidence for what things cost.
Definitely, yeah. Um, so like I said, she died in 1865, probably of puerperal fever,
Okay.
sometimes known as childbed fever.
Mm.
And in 1866, because Samuel continued to not be very good at this, actually sold the rights to the book to another publisher.
Oh, okay, well done, Samuel.
Biographers generally agree that it was a terrible deal that he made, and it was these publishers, Wardlock and Co, who
Mhm.
apparently decided to just ignore the fact that she's dead because people find it more palatable, I guess. Find it's more marketable to sell a book by someone who's alive, apparently.
Yeah. I can imagine, like, for a cookbook or a domestic sort of book. Yeah.
But the posthumous criticism of it is a lot. Like,
Okay.
especially from modern chefs, Clarissa Dixon Wright,
Uh-huh.
says that she basically irreparably damaged English cookery and is responsible for the decline of gastronomic innovation in Britain in the
Oh,
19th and early 20th centuries.
go off, Clarissa.
And people basically say because she became this ubiquitous thing, people were kind of reluctant to step outside of her particular brand of early Victorian cuisine.
Mhm.
Like Mrs. Beeton was just a generic term, sort of way of referring to an authority on cooking by the 1890s, according to the Oxford Dictionary.
Alright. Wow.
So I think she's definitely an influential woman. Whether
Mhm.
she deserves to be seen as an influential woman, it seems has been questioned for pretty much the whole existence of the book.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose when something is that big, it's gonna get a lot of criticism. But then there are also a lot of collections like that from the past
There's
where
criticism and there's criticism.
yeah, yeah, if it's still getting, like, vehemently criticized today.
Yeah, like, influential, some definitely useful information, holistic approach to the running of a household, but also plagiarism, some not particularly good stuff in there in the first place.
Yeah. Kind of a mixed bag, it sounds like.
Yeah, like overall, I think it's worth having a copy of just for historical interest, and there's some genuinely good
Yeah.
recipes in there. It's just unclear how many of those genuinely good recipes are by Mrs. Beeton.
Wow. Okay, I let us know what you think, I guess. Mrs. Beacon, Mrs. Beacon, Mrs. Beacon. Beacon. Can I do that again?
Can't even say her name.
Let us know what you think, I guess. Mrs. Beaton, icon or ruined cookery for hundreds of years.
Not necessarily ruined, but I think stagnated is I don't know, because blaming her for the stagnation from her thing being popular when
I
she
mean,
was only
yeah.
alive for the first few years of its existence seems unfair.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if she'd lived, she might have published something better.
But I think it's interesting to think about. So if you have a suggestion for an episode or you just want to say hi, you can email us um, at breadandthreadpodcast@gmail.com.
You can also find us on Twitter at Bread and Thread, and the same on YouTube and Tumblr for all of your Bread and Thread social media needs.
And if you want to support us, we also have a Patreon, Bread and Thread, where you can get access to a Discord server where we talk about things that we've been making and baking, and monthly recipes, which are not plagiarized from Eliza Acton.
Allegedly.
I stand by this. They're mostly my recipes. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.